Jasmine Carter, who everyone called Jazz, wiped her dirty hands on her old blue rag. She had just finished fixing Mrs. Thompson's Toyota, an old car that rattled like a can of pennies but now ran smooth as butter. Jazz's garage wasn't fancy, just a small shop on the corner of 5th and Maple Street with a flickering neon sign that read Jazz's Auto Fix. But people from all over the city came to her because she could fix cars that other mechanics gave up on. Then, something unexpected happened. A long, shiny black Rolls-Royce rolled up to her shop, its engine purring like a giant cat. The door opened, and out stepped a man in a suit so crisp it looked like it had never been sat in. His silver hair was perfectly combed, and his shoes gleamed under the afternoon sun. Jazz recognized him immediately. Richard Kensington, the CEO of Kensington Motors, one of the biggest car companies in the country. He looked around her small garage, his nose wrinkling like he'd just smelled something bad. Then he smirked. "This is where the famous Jazz the wrench works," he said, chuckling. "I expected something bigger." Jazz wasn't fazed. She crossed her arms and tilted her head. "What can I do for you, Mr. Kensington?" He walked over to his Rolls-Royce and popped the hood, revealing a sputtering engine that coughed like an old man with a cold. "My top mechanics can't figure out why it keeps stalling," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Thought I'd try the local talent." Jazz didn't even need to think. She barely glanced at the engine before saying, "Your fuel injector's clogged. Happens all the time when you put cheap gas in a high-performance engine like this." Kensington's eyes widened for a second, then he burst out laughing, a loud mocking sound that filled the garage. "You expect me to believe a street mechanic just figured out my car's problem in 5 seconds? He reached into his pocket, pulled out $100 bill, and tossed it onto her workbench like she was a beggar. "Thanks for the comedy," he sneered. Then he slammed the hood shut, got back into his Rolls-Royce, and drove off, leaving a cloud of exhaust behind. Jazz picked up the $100 bill, folded it neatly, and slipped it into her pocket. She didn't say anything, but a small knowing smirk played on her lips. She had a feeling this wasn't the last time she'd see Richard Kensington. And she was right. The morning sun had just begun to rise over Jazz's small auto shop when the sound of screeching tires shattered the quiet. A sleek silver Bentley Continental GT skidded to a stop right in front of her garage, its tires kicking up a small cloud of dust. The door flew open before the engine even stopped rumbling, and out stumbled a man in a suit so expensive it probably cost more than Jazz's entire shop. He was tall, with dark hair that looked like it had been perfectly styled just minutes ago, but now it was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. Jazz recognized him immediately. Marcus Langford, the CEO of Langford Luxury Autos and the biggest rival of Richard Kensington. "Please," he gasped, rushing toward her like she was the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. "You have to help me." Jazz wiped her hands on her grease-stained overalls and raised an eyebrow. "Help you with what?" Marcus pointed at his Bentley, his hand shaking. "My prototype engine, it's failing. I have to present it at the Auto Expo today, and if it doesn't work, my company is finished." Jazz crossed her arms. "And you came to me? Shouldn't your fancy engineers be handling this?" Marcus swallowed hard. "They tried. They've been up all night, but they can't fix it. And then..." He hesitated, then sighed. "Then I heard Richard Kensington bragging at the expo this morning about how some street mechanic pretended to know cars and tried to tell him his Rolls-Royce had a clogged fuel injector." Jazz smirked. "Oh, he told people about that, huh?" Marcus nodded. "He was laughing about it, saying you were just guessing. But I know cars. And when I heard that, I did some digging. I found out you rebuilt a Ferrari V12 engine from scrap parts last year. Nobody does that unless they're a real genius." Jazz studied him for a moment. Most rich guys who walked into her shop looked down at her like she was dirt on their shoes. But Marcus? He was looking at her like she held the answers to the universe. Finally, she grinned. "All right. Let's see what you've got." She walked over to the Bentley and popped the hood. Inside was an engine unlike anything she'd ever seen, sleek, high-tech, with wires and tubes snaking everywhere like a robot's nervous system. But something was clearly wrong. The engine sputtered weakly, like a dying heartbeat. Marcus hovered behind her, wringing his hands. "It's our new design, supposed to be the most powerful and efficient engine in the world. But it keeps overheating and shutting down. We can't figure out why." Jazz leaned in, her sharp eyes scanning every inch of the engine. She didn't say anything for a long minute, just traced her fingers along the pipes and wires. Then suddenly, she straightened up. Got it. Marcus blinked. Got what? Your problem, Jazz said, tapping a small metal pipe near the engine's core. Your coolant system is too small. This engine generates way more heat than a normal one, but you're trying to cool it down with the same tiny pipes you'd use in a regular car. It's like trying to put out a bonfire with a water pistol. Marcus's face fell. But we can't redesign the whole system in time. The expo starts in 2 hours. Jazz rolled up her sleeves. Who said anything about redesigning? She turned and marched back into her shop, digging through piles of spare parts like a treasure hunter. She came back with a handful of metal pipes, a few clamps, and a determined glint in her eye. Hold this, she said, shoving a wrench into Marcus's hands. For the next 30 minutes, Jazz worked like a machine, cutting, twisting, rerouting pipes with the precision of a surgeon. Marcus watched in awe as she took parts that looked like junk and turned them into the perfect fix. Finally, she stepped back and wiped her forehead. Try it now. Marcus rushed to the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life, smooth, powerful, like a lion waking up from a nap. No sputtering. No choking. Just pure, perfect power. Marcus's jaw dropped. You fixed it. Jazz smirked. Told you I knew what I was doing. Marcus jumped out of the car, his face split into the biggest grin Jazz had ever seen. This is incredible. You just saved my company. He grabbed her hand and shook it wildly. Thank you. Thank you so much. Jazz chuckled. Yeah. Just don't go telling Kensington about this, all right? But Marcus was already pulling out his phone, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Oh, I'm not just telling him. I'm showing him. And with that, he hopped back into his Bentley and sped off toward the expo, leaving Jazz standing in the dust with a satisfied smile. She had a feeling things were about to get very interesting. Jazz stood over the open hood of Marcus Langford's Bentley, staring at the most advanced engine she'd ever seen. The prototype gleamed under her shop lights, packed with so much technology it looked like something from a sci-fi movie. But right now, it was coughing and wheezing like an old man with a bad cold. Marcus wrung his hands nervously beside her. This engine was supposed to change everything. Faster, cleaner, more powerful than anything Kensington Motors has. But it keeps shutting down after 5 minutes of running. Jazz didn't say anything at first. She just leaned in closer, her sharp eyes scanning every pipe, every wire, every connection. She could feel Marcus holding his breath as she worked. Then she saw it. Your coolant system's too small, she said, pointing to a cluster of thin metal pipes near the engine's core. This beast generates way more heat than a normal engine, but you're trying to cool it with the same tiny pipes you'd put in a regular car. It's like trying to cool a volcano with an ice cube. Marcus's face went white. But we can't redesign the whole cooling system now. The Auto Expo starts in 2 hours. This engine was our big reveal. Jazz didn't panic. Instead, a slow grin spread across her face. Who said anything about redesigning? She turned and marched toward her back room, where piles of spare parts collected dust. Marcus followed, looking confused. What are you doing? We don't have time to. Hold this, Jazz interrupted, shoving a heavy toolbox into his arms. She began digging through her parts like a squirrel hunting for nuts, pulling out pieces of metal pipe, rubber hoses, and strange-looking clamps. But those are just junk parts, Marcus said, his voice shaky. One man's junk is another woman's $1 million fix, Jazz shot back. She carried her armful of parts back to the Bentley and got to work. What happened next was like watching magic. Jazz's hands moved faster than Marcus could follow. She cut pipes with a screeching grinder, bent metal with her bare hands, and connected everything with clamps and bolts. She didn't stop to think, she just knew exactly what to do. At one point, Marcus tried to help. Maybe if we... Nope, Jazz said without looking up. Hand me that wrench. The big one. Sweat dripped down her forehead as she worked, grease smearing across her cheeks. The clock was ticking, but Jazz didn't rush. Every move was precise, every connection perfect. Finally, after what felt like forever but was really only 30 minutes, Jazz stepped back. Her masterpiece looked strange, a maze of pipes and hoses that definitely didn't come with the original engine. But it all connected perfectly, creating a new cooling path for the overheating engine. "Try it now," Jazz said, wiping her hands on her already filthy overalls. Marcus hesitated. "Are you sure this will?" "Just start the car," Jazz said, rolling her eyes. Marcus took a deep breath and turned the key. The engine roared to life with a sound so powerful it made the tools on Jazz's shelves rattle. But unlike before, it didn't sputter or cough. It just kept running, smooth and strong, like a perfectly tuned musical instrument. Marcus's mouth fell open. It's working. Perfectly." He revved the engine, and it responded instantly, the sound deep and healthy. "How did you, with just spare parts?" Jazz shrugged like it was no big deal. "Your engineers were thinking too fancy. Sometimes you just need the right pipes in the right places." She patted the Bentley's hood. "This baby won't overheat now. She'll run all day if you want her to." Marcus looked like he might cry. "You just saved my company. That man Kensington was counting on me failing today. But now..." His face broke into the biggest grin Jazz had ever seen. "Now I get to watch his face when this beauty steals the show." He shook Jazz's hand so hard her arm hurt. "Thank you. Thank you so much. There's no way I can ever repay." Yeah, Jazz said, pulling her hand back. "Just go wow them at your car show. And maybe send some business my way." Marcus nodded eagerly. "Oh, you'll get more than that." He jumped into the Bentley and gave the engine one more rev. The sound echoed through the neighborhood. "This is going to be beautiful." As the Bentley sped away toward the Auto Expo, Jazz couldn't help but smile. She had a feeling Richard Kensington was about to have the worst day of his life. And she was absolutely right. The Grand Auto Expo hall buzzed with excitement, filled with shiny new cars and important people in fancy suits. Richard Kensington stood on a bright red platform next to his company's newest supercar, a smug smile plastered across his face. Reporters snapped pictures as he prepared to unveil what he kept calling his unbeatable engine. "Ladies and gentlemen," Kensington announced, his voice dripping with confidence, "this engine represents the future of automotive technology. There is nothing like it in the world today." Just as he was about to pull off the velvet cover, a deep, powerful roar echoed through the hall. Everyone turned toward the entrance where Marcus Langford's silver Bentley rolled in, its engine purring like a happy lion. The crowd parted as the car glided to the center of the room, its polished surface reflecting the bright expo lights. Kensington's smile froze. His eyebrows shot up so high they nearly disappeared into his hairline. That's impossible," he muttered under his breath. Marcus stepped out of the Bentley to thunderous applause. Thank you," he said, waving to the crowd. "What you're hearing is Langford Luxury's new prototype engine running perfectly thanks to a brilliant mechanic who saw what our engineers missed." Kensington pushed through the crowd, his face turning red. "How did you fix it?" he demanded. "Our team said that engine design was hopeless." Marcus smiled the smile of a man who knew he'd won. "Ask Jazz Carter," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "You know, the mechanic you laughed at yesterday?" The crowd gasped. Reporters immediately started scribbling in their notebooks. Kensington looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon whole. That street mechanic," he sputtered. "The very same," Marcus said, patting his Bentley's hood lovingly. "While your engineers were stuck scratching their heads, Jazz diagnosed the problem in seconds and fixed it in 30 minutes using spare parts from her shop." He turned to the fascinated crowd. "That's real genius, folks." The room erupted in chatter. Camera flashes went off like fireworks. Kensington stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, his perfect moment completely ruined. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Street mechanic outsmarts luxury car CEO, and genius in Greece stuns auto industry, screamed the headlines. Videos of Marcus's Bentley went viral, with millions of views. The week that followed was something Jazz could never have imagined. Her small shop was suddenly flooded with visitors, not just customers wanting their cars fixed, but investors waving checkbooks, begging to fund her own auto tech company. Reporters camped outside her garage, desperate for interviews. Even the mayor showed up to shake her hand. Meanwhile, over at Kensington Motors, things weren't going so well. The moment the news broke about how Jazz had solved the problem Kensington's engineers couldn't, the company's stock price dropped like a rock. People started calling him Richard Kensington, the CEO who didn't recognize genius when he saw it. Back at her shop, Jazz just kept doing what she always did, fixing cars, only now with a line out the door. When a reporter asked how it felt to prove Kensington wrong, she just shrugged and said, "I didn't do it to prove anything. I just like fixing things." But if you looked closely, you might have seen a little extra sparkle in her eye when she said it. As for the moral of the story, it's simple really. Never underestimate someone because of where they work or what they wear. True genius doesn't need a fancy suit or a big office. Sometimes, it's hiding under a pair of greasy coveralls, just waiting for the right moment to shine. And Richard Kensington? Well, let's just say he learned that lesson the hard way.